What's going on, everybody? It's Frito here for your Overwatch. So excited to finally be bringing you our Winston Mastery Guide. Going to be covering so much in today's video. A lot of mechanical stuff that you may not know you need badly to play Winston well, but also a slew of engagement tactics that will seriously upgrade your Winston game. First tip, and maybe the most important thing you take away from this video, because it's going to increase your ability to frag, Winston's animation cancel. This is important because sometimes I see comments from you guys in my Winston gameplay saying, Frito, you should melee before you land. It makes you do more damage, which clues me into a lot of players not doing this correctly. That's because when you do this properly, you increase your overall DPS, but if you don't notice the frame the melee gets snuck in, you won't even see it. And that's what you want to do, because the longer you're able to Tesla and the longer you wait to sneak in a melee a frame before you land, that's how you actually get the extra oomph out of this tactic. This will be much more obvious when we really slow it down. You want to be zapping your target all the way to the ground until you're just about to land, then sneak in the melee so that your jump pad landing animation interrupts the melee so quickly that you won't even see the fist stay out. You'll sneak it in on just about a frame. What this effectively does is change your jump pack land to go from only doing 50 to doing a burst of 80, including the melee with it. Now, it is a 1-2 punch, but it happens so fast it basically hits them at the same time. You should be attempting to do this every single time, and I really suggest that you just play the game a lot of hours, and whenever you jump something, whether the melee is going to hit or not, just train your brain to hit that melee button right before you hit the ground. Not too early, or you won't get the increased effects of it, and I promise you're going to be shocked at how much faster you're able to kill targets. Now, in general, meleeing with Winston is almost always good. It's better against armor, because Winston's Tesla cannon is very weak to armor, so if you're fighting an armored target, you should just melee them anyway. And whenever you can sneak in melees while brawling and you can effectively hit it, go right ahead. That's always good, as long as you don't miss. And when you combine that with jump pack melee animation cancels, you're going to be melting things in front of you. But there's also a lot of other mechanics that I wanted to go over in today's video. And I do apologize, I know a lot of people don't like people playing on alt accounts. I'm playing with lower ranked friends in these diamond clips. And also, what's interesting, when you play at lower ranks, you really start to see strong Winston mechanics carry, because you can really mechanically overpower them if you know what you're doing. Let me show you what I mean. First example is shield dancing. A general principle about playing tank is you want your barriers to do your shielding for you, not your face. This is what allows me to go super aggro into the enemy team's spawn, and for the few seconds that I have this bubble available, me and the Tracer are perfectly safe from this McCree. He needs to win the mechanical movement battle, which is not something people think about often enough, frankly, in the game. But if you're playing up against Ana, McCree, anything that has CC or anti-abilities that's going to wreck you, you want to be able to place your bubble down at a good distance control that you then can dance around it, making it hard for them to hit you with any of their stuns or disables. What the enemy players need to do against me in this situation is actually aggressively walk into my bubble and land their CC, or they just die for free. I take very little damage dancing on the outside ring of it, while dealing damage myself, making for a lot of easy kills to be picked up. You can get better at this technique by focusing on the movement of your opponent and sort of mirroring their motions in the opposite direction. You're actually playing Ring Around the Rosie against them, and the better you are at it, the more untouchable you'll feel. Meanwhile, you're easily zapping them down with damage that's plenty enough to kill them. This is important because I want you to think of your engages with Winston to be all about setting your bubble somewhere useful, not just getting on the enemy team, because you have to avoid damage or you're just gonna die. Notice how I drop my bubble to deny the damage from the Widow and the Zen as I commit on this Mercy, and the timing of all of this is kind of a typical engage to utilize our next technique, which when done right, allows us to make these narrow escapes. Look at the Mercy clip again. Because I launched myself from so far away, my jump pack cooldown has already started by the time I'm even under any threat of the enemy. Because even if the entire enemy focuses the bubble here, it's going to buy me a second or two. I'm getting low, but around the time I need to run away, my jump instantly comes back. The reason is, if you launch yourself from far away from the enemy and go up high, as long as you're not in direct line of of sight of where they can just shoot you in the sky, you're going to have more information of where you want to land, adjust accordingly, get to a safe spot, all the while the next jump pack cooldown is ticking down. So hopefully, by the time you make contact, you'll only have a few seconds before you're able to make your next jump and get the heck out of there. This is what being a nuisance and actually making space with Winston looks like. The better you are at getting in an obnoxious place quickly, but then also getting out the second anyone tries to focus you. Cycling this over and over again on your dives either draws enough aggro to allow someone else to make a play, or will eventually find your own frags yourself. Now, once you have that down, the next area you want to focus on is jump accuracy. This is where you're really going to start to make your money on Winston. As you know, movement is massive in Overwatch, and what you want to be able to do is max out the amount of time you're able to keep zapping your opponent even when they're using movement escapes. So for example, as I turn my attention to the Mercy and she tries to fly away, I make my jump shallow and time it towards when she's going to reach the end of her GA, so that also my jump pack ends up hitting her. There's all manner of movement sets in Overwatch where characters go airborne or quickly dodge to the side. Ideally, when you're pursuing your enemy, you want to be able to track their movement and aim with your movement, so you stick on them, dealing as much damage as possible. The closer you are, the better this can be, because you typically are going to start to get pushed back by different boops and things when they want to get you off them. So the closer you are, the easier this is also to allow you to get those melee hits in. And the way you get the most out of this is really exploiting the mid-air control that Overwatch gives you, where if you want to quickly go from A to B, don't jump high, aim straight ahead of you or even down a bit so you can really narrow the angle. Obviously, if you're chasing a Genji or a Pharah into the air, aiming straight up will give you a jetpack so you can quickly fly. As things adjust mid-air, you can use your movement keys in order to lean different directions, but again, track with your eyes, focus on watching how they're moving, and then respond with the correct movement to mirror however they're moving. Another key tip for this is don't be afraid to raise your sensitivity, especially if you play a lot of tanks. Accuracy is not the be-all end-all on most of the tank characters, whereas you definitely will see a big boon to your gameplay if you're able to react faster, to quickly dodge, or jump into the air. You do have to aim Winston's jumps, and oftentimes it requires you to do so as they use a movement ability, and a lot of those are really fast. So the more one-to-one your response time is, the more success you'll see. Beyond getting accurate jumps to be able to finish off kills, just getting where you want to be is important, because if you miss, you're very likely going to die. This goes hand in hand with getting more value out of your Tesla gun in general. You'll notice whenever I'm leaping, I'm swinging my aim wildly to get onto target so that I'm shooting things as I'm midair. Even when jumping past them, doing 180s and really fast turns to keep up with them, you want to make sure that you have really fast adjustment speed so that your Tesla is hitting targets the entire time that the thing is on your screen. You maximize this by being very comfortable with aiming and spinning while being airborne, and also reading the movement of your enemy, noting that because your weapon is one of the most forgiving guns in the game, but it also isn't the strongest, so you can't afford to ever miss. So because of that, I suggest you focus your attention, leaning your aim a bit ahead of them where they're going to be going, and adjust your aim speed to their move speed. Now, in combining all of this together again, I want to give a short explanation of target priority. As you go in on dives and start poking and prodding to see what you can find, the best rule of thumb is to just try to avoid fighting tanks whenever possible, because your damage and impact does very little against them. And I think because Winston's weapon cleaves, it can be easy to think that hitting multiple targets is important, but I think focusing whatever's low or dueling squishies is always better than trying to hit more things that'll just get healed anyway. You're going to see the most impact with Winston when you're isolating targets and using the dueling tips we mentioned earlier to try to focus them down. Context is always important with this, but Winston's playstyle really breaks the mold of having your tank in front playing with the team. Oftentimes that's the wrong thing to do, and really that's what Rein does. Look at this example on Anubis, where I am peeling for my Zen, the primal forces out our own transcendence, but my damage is kind of irrelevant to the Winston. Meanwhile, there's Zen and Widowmaker who are free firing into my team. And especially since we're playing 2 CP, you can easily get trapped into assuming you have to contest the objective at all times. That's only the case when it's on the last tick. Just about every other time I suggest you go after these squishies in the back, Widow and Zenyatta. This prompts him to trance, isolates the Widow, and I get the kill there. Then it allows me to collapse on the fight with a big crossfire, guaranteeing that we won't lose lose this fight. We do end up giving up a tick, but you never know what could happen if you allow a really powerful backline character like Zen or Widow to go uncontested out in the distance. They can just kill your whole team. And it's exploiting this exact playstyle of isolating squishies outside of the pack of the team that has always made Winston counter Rein Zarya comps. That only stopped being the case with GOATs, but I think you'll find a lot of times in ranked people aren't even playing GOATs, and instead they'll run Rein Zarya on a map like this where it's absolutely terrible. Oasis City Center is a great place to point out these engagement techniques because you should always consider maps with high ground to be favoring Winston if you play like this. The point's not even unlocked yet, so no one has to be on the objective at all. Instead, we swarm around them, dodge their abilities, look to isolate the McCree, then pounce on him, free kill. All the while, I avoid getting swung on by the Rein, getting shot by the Zarya as much as possible, just dodging around. On a map where the objective is this big, mobility characters are king because they can step toe on the objective to contest it and play keep away forever as you run circles around them and divide and conquer. Because as you can see, even though I end up dying in this clip, our mobility characters can dance around the objective forever to stall for respawns, and even going in against a massive man disadvantage, I have Primal Rage to save me, and what do you know, we maintain the point, and they can't even finish a winning fight. This gets really obvious on a map like Numbani, so much so that it's hard to play Rein on this map, even in the GOATs meta. There's tons of high ground to exploit, and the point is rather large, meaning that's not too hard for me to dip my toe in to contest, dance around getting tons of value all the while, and because we're mobility characters, we have fast run back too. And in these scrappy fights, Winston is way more robust than Reinhardt, because Rein starts to get a lot more value when you put resources into him, but in these scrappy like 2v2, 3v3 fights, because Winston can place his bubble down and shoot through it, whereas Rein has to decide between swinging and shielding, you're almost always at an advantage because you can play outside of his range while dealing damage and running away. And of course, the biggest matchup struggle against Rein is your team has to avoid Earth Shatter, which you can block with a well-timed bubble, but for the most part, you're going to be looking to win by farming the squishies he can't protect with your mobility. Now, I want to get more specific into engagement strategies. I mentioned earlier that most of the time your dives are to set up a bubble position, and that's how you make space. Go in, drop it, and get out. Doing this here on Dorado draws so much aggro onto me, my Doomfist is able to get in and get a kill on his counter. On Horizon, I think this is the picture-perfect place to do a bubble engage. This enemy Orisa actually messes up by not popping the Halt on me right here, and it allows me to perfectly drop the bubble right on the edge of their bunker, dodging their value so I can get back to pressure the point, which overforced the rotation, which is the other thing that you want to be thinking of doing when you're not setting up to aggress onto squishies, is being the guy to play the objective, because as Winston, you have a lot more health than many other characters. You can go off and contest for quite a while. This dive here on Eichenwald, I don't shoot anybody, but look at all the space that we make just by starting progress on the cap, forcing them to all turn. Playing slow like this and just poking from the edges, controlling and maintaining the enemy death ball keeps us all alive and buys time for our Widowmaker to hit shots. If I over-engage here and force the fight onto me, it buys less time for our Widow, because I'm very likely to die, so she has to hit a shot immediately. Whereas the more we're posturing around, threatening space, the enemy team can't just go after our Widowmaker. Numbani A is a really good spot for this as well, because we hit two birds with one stone with this bubble engage, where, you know, a lot of squishy characters like Ana love to get their value from this back right corner, so being careful, take some stock of things before we commit in. Quick, get the bubble. We see multiple enemies turn on us, drawing a lot of aggro, so it's time to get the heck out. D.Va rushes me down, and in this few second time frame, my entire team has moved up, so we've denied their ability to shoot down at my team, and we're getting a lot of things to shoot at us and our bubble while taking very little damage and getting to the spot we wanted to anyway. Right above this balcony lets us pressure the point, start capping the objective, forcing them to send members down. I think a lot of pro coaches call it soft engaging as well. That makes sense to me too. Whatever you want to call it, the more you learn this, the more you're going to take over the game from the tank position by requiring less resources onto yourself and maximizing the value of your cooldowns at the same time. That being the case becomes exaggerated when we get into a situation where we can employ another technique called drop engages. Of course, high ground advantage does all sorts of things, and one of them for Winston is is the ability to use high ground to gain information and drop down on your engage rather than jumping in so that you can use the jump to escape if you don't find what you want. Now, especially up this streets phase of Hollywood, this objective, the cart, it doesn't matter until it gets to the checkpoint, really. What we want to do is keep prodding from the perimeter, trying to find a good engagement and running away if we don't have it. Especially in this case, in this game, I was solo tanking. If you have a D.Va with you, then you can play more aggressive because she can eat cooldowns for you, but definitely if you don't, just keep doing soft engages like this because eventually we hit an anti-nade and then I'm able to clean it up. Our goal here is to keep drawing resources out of the enemy towards us until hopefully we or our teammates find kills. This also is another great example of you just can't play Rein on this map because we're using these guerrilla tactics from all the high ground positions. The Rein's not blocking any of the relevant damage ever. We've got angles all over the place and I'm harassing from the side. The Reinhardt eventually has to swap here in order to deal with the high ground. So what's your goal in doing this? What do you want to think of? Well, trying to get touches in on cart and focus fire to try to frag down a squishy, but mainly maintaining the high ground and going after anything that's diving your team. Most of the time, you're not going to be committing. There's too many things in the game that wreck Winston. Instead, you want to posture for an opening. For example, if your Zenyatta gets a Discord orb on something, you can cleave past the Rein or poke him down if it's on him. If an anti-nade gets hit, that's when you want to start to really decide if tossing your body into the mix of the brawl is going to net in a kill. And as long as you're combining with either the focus fire or some support utility, you're going to find those frags. And although you'd ideally never want to die, sometimes it is worth it to trade your life for a critical component of their team comp, like their main healer or their carry DPS, especially the one that counters most of your team. Now, the majority of the video up to this point has been all about frags, mechanics, capitalizing on you getting kills. I did that because at the lower half of the ranks, where the majority of people play, focusing on that will skyrocket your performance. You're going to be fragging a lot of players who want to play the squishy characters, but without teamwork or their own mechanical proficiency, just can't deal with you. Meaning you'll gobble up a lot of free kills, get a lot of free team fights, but you also need to be able to instantly switch your priority if you're in situations where you're not going to be able to get kills, because either the situation or the team comp you're going up against will require you to think about your role a bit differently. A great map to explain this is Gibraltar, which is one of the most Winston-dominant maps in the game. If the enemy comes out on an attack with any kind of death ball, you should assume that if you play this right, you will win for free. Reason being for how strong Winston can be to play the objective on this kind of map. This is even more true when you're playing with a hit scan and a Mercy. Why? Well, because Mercy's best value is damage amping the hit scan, which means if she has to put beams onto you, you're getting less overall value than if you do your job well, avoid damage, and just contest the right ground at all times. Far too often do I see players get on a map or play in a team comp like this, and they just dive the enemy relentlessly, taking tons of damage and requiring their healers to pocket them, whereas, notice how I'm on the outskirts of the fight at all times, punishing the aggression onto my carries, and then sneaking in touches on the cart whenever possible to contest it to delay its progress. This is quite similar to the drop engage segment we talked about before, but in this case, I'm doing even more for the team by doing less, which is sort of a crazy thing to think about and something that you see a lot of the pro tanks do and are really great at knowing when they shouldn't be doing anything. It all comes down to recognizing when your team is in a good spot and you can just wait. This gets even amplified further because this enemy team is attempting to play Reinhardt Brigitte. Frankly, you're a main tank player at GM. There's no excuse to think that Reinhardt's any good here, but you can just see how I can harass from different sides, go up to the high ground, touch the cart, run away. The enemy can never get anything locked down. All the while, I don't require much healing, and my Mercy is allowed to keep the damage amp onto our soldier, which is just devastating poke for this enemy team. My job is to stop things from diving my soldier and to delay the cart whenever possible. I don't even have to get kills here. I just help clean up the fight and transition between high ground control and objective stall. Now, it's in this case where your priorities kind of flip. Before I said you always want to focus squishies. Well, when you want to get frags, that's the case. But when you're in this type of matchup, it's all about poking for primal rage. So just doing more damage overall, even if it's not going to net in a kill, is good because up against now a goats comp, I can't ever fight this enemy. But what I am allowed to do is be one of the most robust objective stallers in the entire game. That's what Winston's Primal Rage does. He's massive, he causes CC, knocks everybody off the point, can survive forever, a really long duration. That buys a lot of time for my DPS to do work. And the more dodging I do and the less committing, the more space I'm making. If you know you can't commit for a kill, don't. Backing off and dodging is such a big play, but see how the enemy's got Rally, Reinhardt, Zarya, trying to push the cart. What my goal here is to try to touch the cart as much as possible, which I need to use my cooldowns to do, taking as little damage as possible, stretching out my health pool, minimizing the amount of distance the cart is getting, and then popping Primal when I don't have a choice, just to stay alive. And that's going to buy time for our respawns to come back, get a bit of displacement on the team so that we have sight lines to actually do meaningful damage. This principle is going to be even more exaggerated in this next clip, where I'm playing against a GOATS comp, and I employ a little trick that I suggest a lot of you try to do with your teammates. When you find yourself in this type of situation, I tell my team, no one touches cart but me. Get that clear in their heads. You're the objective player as Winston. You could do all these tricks that I've taught you, and once they're free to know that you've got the objective, they can do what wins in matchmaking, right? Play deathmatch. Let them do whatever they want to spread out, get frags, get angles on the enemy, knowing that you're going to be the guy to deny progress on the objective. This is how you do more by doing less. I'm not even fighting them here. I'm just trying to touch the cart. Why? Because they got rally armor. My damage doesn't even do anything. They're popping all of these ults that need to get value. So as long as I don't die or don't take too much damage, all the transcendences and rallies in the world doesn't do anything unless they come and chase me down. But anytime they take a look at me, I just jump the other way, dodge Brigida's value, and the GOATS comp is fighting on cart, whiffing at everything, wondering, why are we just winning? I thought just GOATS was meta, right? Well, it's a whole lot easier for your DPS teammates to have enough time to kill the GOATS comp if you do these objective stall tactics. Now, realistically, what the enemy needs to do here is pounce me with everything they got. But if I just keep dodging over and over, abusing cart stalls from cheeky little angles or using high ground like I did on Gibraltar, you really start to see how GOATS comp is inefficient, if not played well. I mean, this defense goes so well that I don't even ever have to pop Primal. This is a game where I'm playing solo tank against GOATS. This should feel impossible if they play it right, but because I'm being so conservative with my resources, I always have them available. I always can jump away. I don't waste Primal just to try to make some Reddit clip. I know it's not going to get a lot of value, so I play conservatively just to stall the point and allow my DPS to carry. That's so important, because if you can't get the kills, don't attempt to. Do the job your hero actually does, which is play the objective while being durable and also elusive, because it is an objective-based game after all. Team fights win games, but you can always pressure the objective to force the team fight you want. And when you're defending the objective, what in effect you're doing is forcing the enemy to come chase you in a spot they don't want to fight. This is also the case on a very notable type of engagement that happens in Overwatch up against the Bastion comp. Teams try to run this, and a lot of teams fail to counter it, mainly because they don't put their attacking pieces in the right place. How do you beat the Bastion? Well, you need your damage to get set up in the right spots to get angles on it, which is hard because the Orisa shield comes back so frequently, but the way you make space for that to happen is by pressuring the objective as Winston. Remember, diving Bastion as Winston is a nightmare, but just like we avoid contact with the GOATS comp, we avoid contact with the Bastion here, forcing something to come down onto the point with us, and I'm saving my bubble and cooldowns waiting for an opening. They start to come down, Orisa gets headshot, we capitalize, that's the whole team fight done. Just as well, whatever would come get the point, then we contest that, because the way their comp functions is it will be difficult for them to put enough resources to keep their stallers alive. Conversely as well, I can set up bubble engages up top to buy my team a bit of time, but really finding the spaces to exist near the objective and the fight while not overcommitting your face to die is the secret to getting this kind of play to work. Now, in our last section of the video, I wanted to cover Primal Rage, which is where the real fun begins. When you're at about 85 ult charge or so, as long as you don't get instantly deleted, you can use it like I do in this clip to finally be able to commit in deeper, because as long as you land your other abilities, you'll farm up Primal by the time you need to escape. This will allow you to play even more aggressive towards the enemy, obnoxiously so, and when you combine with all the other other things we cover today, it's where you'll find the biggest opportunity to carry the game. Because not only are you going to be draining tons of resources out of them, but you actually have some serious potential to get as many kills as a Dragon Blade. So the number one way to secure kills with Primal Rage is to attempt what's called cornering, which you can see me go for in this Dorado clip, where I'm going in deep. I know I have Primal to bail myself out, but I'm trying to line up, setting up a boop onto the enemy into a corner because it makes it the most easy to juggle them and hit multiple times. You see, your jump packs still do 50, but your fists only do 40. So realistically, if you can help it, you want to be able to knock them into a corner, then jump pack and land on them. That's how you do the most damage. Typically, this is hard to do because your fist, if it hits them first, is going to knock them away from your jump pack. So what you can do is try to land on them first, then punch. Or you can hit the Dream like I do on this McCree, where I jump at him, punch him midair to launch him where I'm going, so I end up landing on him as well. This essentially is an intensified version of the other jump tech that we mentioned earlier, the same stuff that you want to do in tracking the motion and movement of the opponents as they try to dodge you while you control your jump to pursue them still applies here, but just in a more rapid pace with a 2-second jump cooldown. Just like our normal fragging, you'll get the most value when you're trying to focus down squishies, but targets that either have a lot of health or can't die at all, look to try to set them up to either knock off the map or knock them places they don't want to be. Like you can send a Reinhardt towards your team so that they can surround him. Don't do this if he has Earth Shatter. Your team will not be happy about that. Or knocking threats away like a High Noon, that kind of thing. My biggest tip for this is be sure to move as fast as you can. And it even would be worth you practicing trying to use the leap on cooldown, even if it doesn't fit the situation, just so you start to learn how to control the crazy movement. Because if you are able to jump and readjust that fast, you're going to be a lot harder to hit because, of course, you have 1,000 HP, but you're a massive target. So if you're not moving fast enough, you will get focused down really quickly. So a lot of times it's better to even miss your jump if you had to, because just dodging and CCing and drawing aggro can be more value than worrying about being too accurate and then just getting melted anyway. Just like swinging around Genji's sword, remember, the melees have a persistent hitbox. So as you go for a swing, you can really whip your camera around in order to secure a connection and hopefully even multiple connections. One swing can hit every target in front of you if you swing your camera fast enough. Well guys, that's going to be everything for my Winston Mastery Guide. I hope you did find it useful. Covered a ton of stuff in today's video, so don't be afraid to come back to it in the future. And if you have any further questions, please leave them in the comment section down below. If you did enjoy the video, please be sure to leave it a like. It really does help us out and lets us know that you're enjoying the content. And if you haven't already, please subscribe and be sure to hit the bell icon so that you get notified when our videos go live. Link to the description is our Twitter, where we tweet out news updates and dank memes. That's been it for me. I've been Frito for your Overwatch. I'll see you guys next time.